musician,
long-distance kayaker,
a businessman,
she looks after animals,
artist,
author.
We interview remarkable people.
They're talented in so many different areas.
You're listening to The Dialogue.
89.7 FM Eastside Radio.
You're listening to The Dialogue on 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha, and today I interview a remarkable woman, Babette Bensoussan, who is an award-winning successful businesswoman, life leader, business coach and author, and has won a slew of fantastic awards and has done some incredible business and life things in her journey. So welcome.
Thank you, Natasha.
I can now hear you, which is great. And sometimes we have to have a couple of goes at this, unfortunately. I am fascinated by the fact that you are such an award-winning woman, and you've won awards that actually I haven't even heard of, but are incredible. Let's talk a little bit about that one award, that you're the only woman outside of America that's won. And in fact, I think the only person in Australia.
Yes. That's correct. Well, what happened is that in 2006, I was awarded what's called the SCIP, SCIP Meritorious Award. And SCIP is the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals. They're based in Washington, D.C., and they're a global organization that represents consultants and people that work in the area of strategy or competitive intelligence. And so I was given the award. I was the recipient. And there's only been about 20 people in the world who've ever received it. People like Bob Galvin, who was the chairman and founder of Motorola.
Goodness.
Michael Porter, who's the highest paid Harvard professor in the world. And I'm the only woman.
I'm so flattered you're here and in my studio.
Doesn't mean a thing, though.
I think it does. It's very important to me at any rate.
Lovely.
You were born in Casablanca.
I was.
It's so sexy. It sounds so sexy to be born in Casablanca. And you speak quite a few languages.
I speak French at home. Well, I spoke French at home with my parents.
But you were a bit of a dummy at school.
Yes,
I was. So let's go back to Casablanca.
Okay.
Why did you guys leave? Why did your family leave?
We left in 1956 when when Morocco was given its independence, and at that time, both Australia and Canada had fabulous immigration campaigns going, and so my father thought, oh well, let's come to Australia. It's very similar, the climate, to Morocco. So we got on a boat and came out to Australia to have a look at what it was like and stayed.
You grew up in a fairly conservative Jewish family.
I did.
And the expectation was that you were really going to go out there and get married and have some babies.
That's right.
You didn't do that, did you?
No.
Not for many, many years. No babies.
No babies.
And you just didn't follow the trend that was set for you.
Correct.
Why?
That's a really good question, Why didn't I follow the trend? I guess there was something inside of me that wanted more than just, that wanted to prove myself, I guess, or acknowledge myself as an individual, as a person, rather than as a, typical path that women went down.
So, grew up in Casablanca, came to Australia. You said when you came here, it was hard to be so conservatively Jewish because there were no kosher butchers.
That was the other thing. Yeah, well, the kosher butcher in 1956 was based in Melbourne. Right. There was nothing in Sydney. So if you wanted kosher meat or anything, I understand from my parents, it had to be flown up from Melbourne. So my parents became a bit more liberal. And, my father then joined Sydney University as an academic. And, I went to Massey House and then Kambala, and then we moved. Dad was appointed to Macquarie University, and we moved to the North Shore, and I then went to Castle Cove. We lived in Castle Cove.
So really just a Sydney girl.
That's it.
Just a Sydney girl with, a nice family and
absolutely. Until Dad got sabbatical leave.
Right.
And then the whole family gets packed up and off we go to Europe. And so, we spent a year in Europe because Dad's sabbatical leave was a year. So I've spoken, I used to speak multiple languages.
You speak French currently,
I speak
a bit
French,
of German.
a bit of German. I did German at high school, and then I did a year in Switzerland, and then spoke a little bit of Italian, a little bit of Spanish, and then later on in life I also studied Japanese. And I love languages. I love because it helps you interact with people.
And communicate.
Yeah, I love communication.
Now, you've also sailed in a cruise boat around the world.
Yeah, it's not a
not quite like it wasn't meant to be, but you've done the world, haven't you?
Well, when Dad got sabbatical leave, we never took the plane. We went by boat. So life was a lot slower in the 1960s and the 1970s to what it is now. So we did, the first time we went to Europe, we went by boat via the Suez Canal to Italy and back again via the Suez Canal. So we were the last passenger convoy to go through the Suez Canal before it was blockaded. And then the second time we went to Europe, we went via South Africa, the Azores Islands, and got off in Lisbon, in Portugal, and then we picked up the boat in Rotterdam and went through the Panama Canal and came back to Sydney that way.
You didn't do well enough at school to go to university.
No, I had tutors.
I was
a dumb one.
You were a dummy,
Yeah,
which is not true, because obviously I think you were just bored and possibly a bit lazy. But
yeah,
I don't think you're definitely not dumb.
Yeah.
But you went to America and you worked for Austrade in
Yes.
America, and
In
you
LA.
said that you were very grateful to the Americans for the second part of your life, the second part of that education life.
I have to say, I will always be grateful to American women. The way American women interact with each other is just wonderful. And one of the things I found that the American women taught me that if you have a dream, follow it. And that's what brought me back to Australia to do my studies.
What was the dream? What was the dream?
I wanted to be a respected businesswoman.
Why do you think? What was important about, you could have been a respected anything. But,
Correct.
But businesswoman...
I don't know. I think because I've always loved business. I have a
Okay.
passion for business. I have a passion for marketing and for strategy. I just think they're wonderful. How do you get a customer? How do you keep a customer? They're things that fascinate me. How do you survive? What are the things you need to do to have the best people? That's all that kind of strategy stuff has always been of great interest to me. So that's why,
You went back to university as a mature-age student, and it
Student.
took you 10 years to get an MBA, which is all you wanted, was this MBA.
But
10 years, that's phenomenal.
But because at that time in the 1980s, you had to have an undergraduate degree. You couldn't go in and do an MBA without an undergraduate degree. So I had to do 6 years part-time as an undergraduate. And I got my Bachelor of Business with double majors in marketing and economics. And then I went on to do my MBA. But I had to get the undergraduate degree. So by the time I did my MBA, they had started to lower the doors to allow you to come in as a mature age student to go straight into the MBA.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue. I am interviewing Babette Bensoussan, who is an award-winning successful businesswoman, life leader, business coach and author. She is currently sharing with us her journey through life to the path of success. What is success to you? What does success mean to you?
Today it means something very different to what it did.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So in the past, success was all about being recognized. Today, I think success for me is more an internal thing for me than it was before. So before, my success, I knew I was successful if I was recognized by others. Today, success for me is, am I happy? Am I healthy? And can I do what I want to do when I want to do it? That to
Okay.
me is true success.
That's great. So you actually started your business in the last year of your MBA, which apparently
Yes.
was touted to by your professors and everyone as the path to failure.
Absolutely. It was a recession. Why would you start a business during a recession? But, I'm dumb, so I went for it.
Clearly not at all. Clearly
So
not at all.
I did it. But the wonderful thing is that 25 years later, I'm still running my business. And one of the wonderful things in my life, one of the highlights, was when one of my professors who had said that I was doing a dumb thing, I had no competitive advantage, came up to me and said, "You saw something we didn't see."
Oh, wow.
And that was just so powerful.
That's fantastic.
It was.
Now, you started that business and you carried on educating yourself.
Yes.
You haven't stopped educating yourself.
Never.
Why? A lot of people just stop.
I think if you stop educating yourself, no matter what you do, you might as well drop dead. I think learning is one of the greatest gifts we have. Whether you learn to do a tapestry, whether you learn to stick something to a wall, whatever, as long as you keep learning. The moment you stop learning, you might as well give it in, go dig your grave.
So
Sorry. I have very strong views about learning.
you'd have to have a strong view in order to be able to actually do what you do. You currently work with very high-powered business people. What does that give you? And what do you do for them? Actually, let's go back. Sorry, I've
Okay.
jumped.
Okay.
Let's jump. Let's go back.
Okay.
The business is in this. I love this. What does the business actually do?
Okay. So when I started my business, I started it in the area of strategic planning, helping companies develop business plans, marketing strategies, and an area called competitive intelligence. Competitive intelligence is all about helping people in organizations to understand how competitive they are and how they can be more competitive. That's it. Quite simple. How to make better competitive decisions in the organization.
But not many people do that.
No.
You're quite unique in what you offer.
Well, it's interesting. Larger corporations in busy markets, in very intense markets like the United States, the Chinese, the Asia and the Europeans, they do a lot of competitive intelligence. Some of our larger companies here do some competitive intelligence, but nowhere near the depth and breadth that international competitors are doing it at.
So you did that. You've
Yep.
also got a counselling. You became
Okay.
a counsellor.
So once I got my award from the United States in 2006, I thought, oh, well, I've hit, I got the Oscar.
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
do I go from here? I got the Oscar. Where do I go? And it wasn't recognised here in Australia very well. So I decided to do a postgraduate degree in counselling. And then I thought, why am I throwing all my business experience away? So I did some research. I did some competitive intelligence to help me find which organisation. And I found a company in the US, a coaching training company that gave you a unique tool called energy leadership. And I thought, yep, I'm going to go there. And the US are very avant-garde in their coaching principles and learnings and research. So I went to the US, and so I'm now working as a life leadership and business coach with professionals, and I love it. I just love it.
Now, the counselling thing came out of your own stint in counselling. You
It
took
did.
yourself off and decided that you wanted to
Yep.
heal, or what was the idea? I mean, you were
That's
successful, you were kicking goals, and yet you decided to go into some intense therapy.
I did. And let me, when I finished my MBA, I started to catch up on some reading. And I love a lot of spiritual reading. And I came across the books Conversations with God
Oh, yes.
by Neil Donald Walsh. And I said, and I realized when I was reading, it was like I sucked those books in. My soul was so ready for the message in the books. And I realized that I was living my life in fear, always having to be better, always having to do something, as if there was something chasing me, to be fearful all the time. And I said, I no longer want to live in fear. I want to come from love. So I went and I realized if I really wanted to change the pure essence of who I am, from someone of fearful to someone coming from love and caring, I needed to go into therapy. And so I went into therapy.
And you said it was remarkable.
It was the hardest journey I've ever been on. I think I cried for the first 3 years.
And it was 3 years. It was the first 3 years you cried, and then you.
And once, yeah. But I was blessed in that I had the most fabulous therapist, clinical psychotherapist to work with for 3 years.
Now, I always feel that your upbringing kind of informs your future. I always believe that what happens at home and in those formative years actually informs how you turn out and what becomes, what happens to you. What do you think you took from your childhood that has really kind of pushed you into the life that you've sort of adopted?
I think the fact that my parents took the leap, leaving very large families. In my father's family, there were 9 children. In my mother's, there were 8. So they grew up with lots of family, and they left it to come to a country where they didn't speak the language. They knew no one. And they took that step for their future. And that courage, that determination, I think is what I've picked up from my childhood, that you can't put someone down.
Now, you have a bit of pink hair.
Yes.
On the one side, some streaks.
The rebel streak.
The rebel streaks, and I found it quite strange when I did ask you about it, because it's quite sort of contrary to the way that you present yourself.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting the answer that you gave as to why you have these purple streaks in this short cropped little blonde hair of yours.
The reason, and it's interesting, it's a lesson I learned in counselling and in life as well. Never judge a book by its cover. And I think the pink streak reminds me, don't judge people by their cover. So it's my little reminder.
You're a rebel
I'm
underneath
a
it all.
rebel.
You're a thought rebel.
Yep. Just because someone looks like something, don't assume.
And I think that's so true. Now, let's talk about these books you've written, because there have been quite a few. I mean, you 7 contributed to 2, and then written a third one that I couldn't even write down because by that stage I was so overwhelmed. Why write books? Why share your knowledge through books? And what have they done for you and for other people?
Okay.
Apparently they're used in universities.
Yes.
All over.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
They've been translated into about 6 languages.
Really?
Yeah. Gosh, why did I write the books?
I love this little one you gave me. It's tiny and it's gorgeous, and it's mind-shifting snippets for creative thought. And I it's so easy.
You just flick it open.
Even a dummy can read this and get something out of it, because it's not hard reading. No. You don't have to be a reader. Yeah. I mean, one-liners. I'll be back.
From Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. What we've got here is a failure to communicate. Cool hand Luke.
Yeah.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. The Godfather. I mean, these are so good. We're on a mission from God. The Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
You're talking to me. I can even do that with my little dentistry work that I've had done today. So tell me about the books.
Well, the books were part of my specific business strategy. I wanted to be an expert. I wanted to be recognized as an expert. What do experts do? So you start thinking. So this is all about strategy again, my passion of strategy. And experts are people who write, they speak, they write books, they write articles, they teach. So I made sure that I fulfilled all of that in my strategic plan. So books was a big part of it. And the first book, we did so much for the first book, in preparing the first book, that we had enough material for the second book. And as a result of having material for the second book, we then thought, oh, well, we need to make a book for people who don't have a master's or don't have a business degree. So then we wrote the third one. And then the Financial Times in the UK wanted a specific book for Financial Times readers. So we wrote another one.
So it just kept on rolling.
It just kept on rolling from the first one.
You're well recognized within your industry, and certainly in
overseas. Yes.
Overseas, and yet you said you felt a little bit maligned that the Australians haven't really recognized your contribution in the way that you've done it?
I think it's because a lot of Australian firms don't do competitive intelligence, don't understand how it can help make better decisions. See, that's its purpose, is to help executives make better decisions instead of decisions that are evidently the wrong decisions. So if you look at the case study that was in the Good Weekend, for example, around Slater and Gordon, that was just 2 weekends ago. And what they said in the article is dead right. Hubris is what's damaging Slater and Gordon. The information for their decision making to purchase that business in the UK was available on the internet.
But they didn't do it.
They
didn't do the research.
Or they denied it.
Exactly.
Or there was something. So there was nothing in there. There wasn't a voice of reason saying to someone, to the CEO, hold on a second, have we looked at these factors? It's the same. It's like there are so many other cases. You can't stop an executive making a certain decision, but we need to make sure that the executives, or we need to try and show that CEOs and senior executives and boards who are making decisions have got the information and the insights that they need to make.
Absolutely. Well, one would assume that a CEO would do that. Clearly they don't. Clearly they're not.
Not in Australia. Not in Australia.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show. I'm interviewing Babette Bensoussan, who is an award-winning successful businesswoman, life leader, business coach, author, all-out fun, pink-haired, great lady. Rebel with a cause. With the cause. Now, we're having a chat about your life and how you've sort of become clearly a brilliant person at what you do. I want to know, and we've touched on this before, about what you fear. You said nothing, and I just refused to believe that. And there was something that you feared. In fact, two things that you still fear.
The main one that I fear is dying in pain.
Do you, I always wonder that if you die in pain, will you know you're in pain, and how long will you know you're in pain while you're dying? And do you give that thought? I mean, do you give dying in pain thought?
I think you do a little when you hear of people who have died badly. When you hear of people who have suffered right up to the very end. So I think, yes, you do. I believe in voluntary euthanasia.
So do I.
And, and when you hear stories of poor people, and it just, I can't fathom it, how we allow. It's okay for us to kill animals who are in pain, but we can't do that to a human being, and we're meant to be more sophisticated.
Or to ourselves.
Exactly.
Which is, I find, absolutely ridiculous.
I do too.
I fully agree with you. We could do a high five now, you and I.
Yes.
And you said abandonment was the other thing.
Yeah, being abandoned. I think, and that I think comes from childhood experience when, I had to have my tonsils out. And so I had to stay in the hospital on my own. And back in the 1960s, parents didn't stay with their children. It was very different. And I think that experience of being in hospital, I felt abandoned. And so that's always been a fear behind me, that I will be abandoned by friends. And, and I just think of, fear is, you're living to an old age, you're 99, every friend has died.
That terrifies me. I keep thinking that maybe it's not so cool to live so long.
That's right.
But you didn't have any kind of lasting relationships when you were sort of younger and while you were building your business and doing your education, but you have been married for the last 20 years to a gorgeous man who you think is the most divine person ever.
I am so blessed. I can't tell you.
Why? What does he do for you that makes you feel so fantastic?
He looks after me so well. We share, he's my best friend. We share so much together. And we have the same values. And I think that is really, really important for couples, to have the same values. It's not just physical, but I think if we can have the same values and the same, agree on the same direction of things, I think that makes life a hell of a lot easier.
It does.
And there's an understanding. And he's willing, he's open to learning things. So remember we talked a little while earlier about the Myers-Briggs type indicator.
Yes.
So I got him to do it. So
Okay.
now we learn that we're two different people. In fact, we're complete opposites. But we make space for each one of us. And I think that openness, that willingness is wonderful in him. I'm very lucky.
Let's talk a little bit. We're running out of time because, of course, these interviews go so quickly. Let's talk a little bit about your leisure time. What do you do for fun, seeing as you're the rebel with the cause? I mean, what is your fun stuff?
Okay.
Outside of work, because I know you love work.
Yeah. My real fun stuff is watching movies or reading books.
What kind of movies do we like?
I like any kind of movie that has a good ending.
What's a good ending?
That ends up on a positive note.
Okay, so it has to be a good, happy ending. Okay, yes.
It has to end on a positive note. I don't like movies that give me back reality. I'm living life. I'm coaching clients who have got heaps of issues. I've counselled clients with heaps of issue. I don't need to see it on a screen.
Fair enough.
And books are the same. I don't particularly care for novels. I'm part of a fabulous book club.
Are you?
Oh, yeah. We're called Readers Inc. And
It has a name. Your book
has
club is
a name.
fantastic.
We have some wonderful women on it. And they're all very smart women. So our discussions are really extraordinary about a book. And in fact, they're so extraordinary that even books we don't like, we go back and read them a second time.
Wow, okay.
Because somebody has made some idea about the book or something. But I also like spiritual books. So they're the two, novels and spiritual books. And learning, of course.
And outside of like, I'm just curious. I think there has to be like something, food. Do you love food and any of those kind of? I'm looking for something that's sensory. I'm curious about that.
Yes, there is one little
Okay,
thing I do.
tell me.
And that's collage.
Right. I knew there was something in there. There has to be. I was like, it can't just be movies. Collage.
I love doing collage. I find it so meditative. So it's creating designs, drawings with different materials, beads. I've got them all over the house. So you start off with material, you glue them down, and then you start with beads, and you cut up things, and
you love that.
I love it. I find it so meditative. So I've done also tapestries. I've made rugs.
So there's a very creative soul inside there as well.
Oh, absolutely.
A huge, a pink streaked creative
If
rebel with a cause.
Yeah, that's my next part of my life.
We've come to the end of the interview. I've been interviewing Babette Bensoussan, who is an award-winning, successful businesswoman, life leader, and business coach and author. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your life.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And for being so open and honest with me.
Thanks,
And
Natasha.
we'll be back next week with another fantastic interview